That's really bad, because I have to use them. So you have some vocabulary to learn, you know. This is English vocabulary. If you're English major, it's good for you, ultimately. Yeah, I can guarantee. I mean, some of you will be translators. You will hit these terms at some point. Larynx is new. Yep. And pharynx is new.
Follow.
Teeth cannot be new.
No.
So, I mean here, so think of larynx and the pharynx as different parts of the throat. You know, throat, right? The Adam's apple, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. So, instead of think of the pharynx as the Adam's apple on the inside, because this is what it is. Okay. And the pharynx is the upper part of your throat. You've heard about pharyngeal inflammation, that kind of stuff. See, when I was like a little bit younger, when I was a teenager, I loved to skip school. And my mom is a medical doctor, so I would go to her, and then she always had these certificates of home life with a stamp and stuff. And you can go write it incomprehensibly, and then you're sick. So I would go to her and ask her, so how do you say, like in medical language, a sore throat? And she would say something. So I learned this very, very quickly. So this is the pharynx. That's the new term. But just think about it, when you have a sore throat, this is where it hurts. All right. Now, I don't know these terms in Turkish, unfortunately, but the soft palate, if you curl your tongue back and go through the arch, the arch, and you go through, that's the hard palate. Okay? And then the soft palate, or the velum, is the soft part that's right back to the arch. Okay? It moves. The alveolar ridge is right behind your front teeth, the upper front teeth. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Okay? I think those must be the most difficult things in this, right? Because the whole thing is you, and this is the tongue. The tongue is not you. No, not you. Alveolar, hard palate, soft palate. Ends with a uvula that flaps back and forth and trips. This is the toil of learning. I drowned you in new terms and new concepts today. We'll be sticking the news. Good, that's the bad news. Okay, I have to use them for the rest of the class. The good news is that I'm going to be using them for several more classes. So, if you take the pain of actually studying this drawing, and I can send you the accompanying texts. It's not that hard. We'll be listening to some sounds as well. If you just take a sweep on the good old internet, like vocal tract, you will hit drawings of this kind. You may even hit X-rays. So with some amount of effort, this is something completely learnable, but it is like the kind of learning where you don't, it's intellectually not so stimulating because you have to learn by heart a bunch of stuff. And if you're not into the learning by heart, it's not that much fun. But it is the biological basis of how we produce sounds. And ultimately, this is what we want to describe these sounds. We describe them in terms of these features. So, I'll go to the kinds of sounds, major kinds of sounds that we produce. Pulmonic consonants and non-pulmonic consonants. and I'll spend a lot of time on the mnemonic words. So the airflow, the place of articulation, how we produce them, and then there are a bunch of supersegmental features that may or may not be relevant. All right. The IPA was established in Paris in the late 19th century. I've listed here the two big anniversaries that it recently had. It was meant to represent the sounds of the world, in the languages of the world, independent of a writing system. Now, obviously, it is not very independent of a writing system because it is based on the Latin alphabet. What is meant, like, even if your language is written in a Latin alphabet, a grapheme, a letter, does not always represent a sound. Sometimes two graphemes are used for one sound, or sometimes one sound has a grapheme that does not represent it at all. Okay. So if you're serious about describing languages of the world, you need a uniform and a clear system that represents them. So this is what the IPA has been meant to be. It is nothing that is written on stone. It is something that is being modified all the time. And this is what you have to learn to use when you're learning about comparison of languages of the world. So this is half of the table that represents consonant sounds in the languages of the world. It has two dimensions. One is horizontal, and the other is vertical. The horizontal one indicates place of articulation, where in the cavity, usually the mouth, does the obstruction occur for the production of a consonant. So, obstruction, and this is just half of the mouth. Okay. Obstruction can occur at the lips. It can occur at the lips and teeth at the alveolar ridge, right behind the alveolar ridge, and with the tongue curled at the alveolar ridge. Look at, like when I was learning the IPA, all you had to do was stare at the table. So this is where the tongue goes. This indicates how the obstruction is achieved. Is it like full obstruction? So when the airflow comes, you get an explosion. Does it go into the nasal cavity? Is it a trill? So something vibrates. Is it like a one-time contact and not a continuous contact? So it's a very short contact. Is it friction? Is it something of a short contact with friction and the air can go on both sides of the obstruction? That's a lateral fricative. Is it something that is close to contact but not the full contact? So approximate means, oh, it almost touched something but it didn't. Let's do whoop. And is it almost contact, and again you have several sides or two sides of the airflow. Now what I wanted to say was, when I was learning the IPA, there was no internet obviously, and you stared at this table and you tried to imagine, well, some of these symbols suggest something and some of them you know. Nowadays you can listen to all of this, which I think does help. This is the sounds that we are aware of while this loads. I hope it will load me to a website so we can click around and hear something. Yeah, it did. It just didn't pop me up. Okay. So, here, it's actually the whole, we were here with the retroflex sounds. Let me play some of them.
Da, da.
So the retroflex,
Da, da.
retroflex sounds are very often encountered in the languages of India. Okay. Hindi has a lot of retroflex, like that. So until the retroflex sounds, we are in the front part of the mouth. Here we go into the back part of the mouth. The hard palate, the soft palate, and then the uvula. Pharynx down here, very few sounds into the pharynx, and then the glottal stop, way down into the larynx. Are you following the horizontal contact? Here, as I said, full closure. When the airflow comes, there is an explosion. Beep.
Ba, ba.
Alright?
Oh.
Okay. Another full closure.
Da, da.
Okay, that reminded me, to find where alveolar ridge is, you can try pronouncing da, da, okay? When you say da, something like da, da, your tongue goes directly on the alveolar ridge. That's your alveolar ridge, okay? Then, apart from that, those are the pulmonic consonants. So, what we need to be aware of is the place where in the mouth, lips, front mouth down to the retroflex, back mouth from the palatal and on. And explosives, full closure, and then various kinds of short contact but not full closure, so friction. The tongue is th, it does not close the air completely. It allows friction, and then instead of the air flowing through one channel, with laterals it may go through two channels. I can play the Polish shell. That's a nice lateral friction. And then the approximates close almost the contact with no contact. The labio dental approximate is going to play. It doesn't want to play.
Va.
Oh.
Va.
Alright. Now, the non-pulmonic consonants. The airflow is restricted and channeled into other cavities. So, there are clicks, there could be implosives, or could be ejectives. For clicks, we most often go to Namibia and Botswana. I don't know, you're way too young to have seen. There's a movie, a classic movie to me, one of the best movies ever made. It's called The Gods Must Be Crazy. It was produced in the 80s. And if you want a good illustration of clicks, this is the movie. I cannot play the movie here, but I do recommend it because it's a great film. So, that's the bilabial click. A good click, a post-alveolar click. So the airflow is constricted between the larynx and an obstruction way further in the mouth. The implosives.
Da.
So the sound it is inside the mouth instead of like going outside.
Da, da. Ga, ga.
Those are sounds. And then the adjectives. And then one of my favorite. It is a sound. It is a sound. I promise. Now we've been looking at simple consonants. They're consonants that will start with an plosive and finish with a fricative. Those are called the affricates. Can you think of any affricates in Turkish?
What's the
Starts
Oh.
ç, ça, ja.
Çakal.
Za, za.
Okay, starts with a plosive, finishes with a fricative. So it starts with an explosion and then it finishes with friction. Phonetically, two symbols are used to represent it with a bracket above to show that it's one sound. All right? Now, with that excursion cleared, I thought it would be useful to see what kinds of systems, what kinds of